Hey guys, so this is my Singer 44-9. I think it's dated 1952 or 1956. I don't remember exactly. It's got an AL date code, so I'd have to look it up. But it's like, around the 50s. Picked this machine up not too long ago, actually. I was pretty excited about it, and I'll show you why. This machine's pretty unique here in a second. But you're probably looking at it and thinking, man, this thing looks a little bit smaller than your typical industrial size machine. And that is because it is. It's actually a few inches shorter in width than a standard machine. Kind of a bummer for me, actually. Typically I'd say, oh, that's a great thing. It's a smaller footprint. You can use a smaller table if you want. It's lighter. But kind of a bummer for me. I picked the machine up hoping that I'd be able to drop it in that table over there. I actually made that. I made the top. It's black walnut. I welded the legs. I was excited about it. I have a FAF 145 in there right now. And I bought this machine with hopes of being able to drop it in that table with that motor setup and everything when I wanted to alternate between using the FAF and then using this Singer for lighter medium duty work. Fortunately it doesn't fit, so I may end up selling it. I haven't decided yet. I restored it. I'm kind of attached to it now that I put on the time into getting it up and running, and it's really capable. So I don't know if I want to let it go, but I don't know if I have really the room for so many industrial tables. But there wasn't a lot of information about this machine on the internet. I scoured everywhere trying to get more info on it, and it's just really not there. So I thought I'd do a video to kind of show some of the similarities to some of the other machines and some of the differences and some of the features that this machine has that kind of differentiates it from the rest. So let's just get into it. Really what this machine is, in the whole Singer 44 line, is a short arm version of the more popular, more prevalent Singer 31 series, and probably the most common of that being the 3115. So it is a vertical oscillating hook machine that uses a class 15 size bobbin. So basically the entire lower half and everything, there are so many crossovers for parts on this to the 31. It's basically like a little bit smaller version of the 31 series. So if you're looking for parts, chances are good that if it's off a 31 series Singer, it'll fit on this machine. And the reason I say that is because there are so many 31 series parts all over the internet. It's not hard at all. If you need to replace the tension unit, thread guides, dials, whatever, they're all over. The main thing I would look out for when you're looking at this is you want to make sure that the hook is sharp. There's not a lot of play in the machine. I mean, it's going to happen over 50 years. Things come out of adjustment. When I got this one, this was so loose, it was going back and forth. The machine was so loud. I mean, I couldn't even listen to it. It was just like absurd. So you want to make things will come loose, but you want to make sure that the tolerances aren't really like worn down, like from lack of oil and just running it dry. It will wear the contact points, and then you're going to get some slop in the parts. But the bobbin case, the whole hook assembly is pretty clean. I mean, I don't polish, especially on industrial machines. I don't spend a great deal of time really cleaning them out because they're not sitting in my living room or something. And I don't care what the underside of the machine looks like. But you want all the contact points to be clean. So you can see this is the bobbin case. You can find these pretty readily on the internet. I've seen them for like $5 on what is it, wawak.com or wawak.com, WAWAK.com. You can find bobbin cases. It's from 31 series line. It'll fit this machine, and it's a class 15 size bobbin. So it's a really common bobbin size in this machine. You can find the bobbin basically anywhere that's going to be selling sewing stuff. Probably even, I would say, even like a Walmart. This is what the bobbin looks like. It's a pretty high capacity bobbin for like a home sewing machine. for what this machine is designed for, you don't need these monster-sized bobbins that you would see on some of the larger industrials. Let's say like some of the ones where the intention was to use the machine on like making sails for boats and stuff, because if they have to change a bobbin halfway through a project or 3 times during a single run, it's a problem for them. But for the size of projects that you'd be using on this, I almost prefer having a smaller size bobbin, because you get like halfway down, you get a part of the way down, it's like, oh, I don't know what to do, like I don't know if that's enough. With this I know, and you'll get a good idea of how much actually is there. You could see the size difference between some like a really huge bobbin like this, I think this is like a class M or U or something, versus the class 15. So really common bobbin size, which is great because you can readily find them. So, and you can have a whole stockpile with all different colors if you're changing colors frequently. But oh yeah, the adjustable stitch length is here. It's this little knob. You raise it to the top, 0 stitches per inch. To the bottom, I think the longest stitch is 6 inches. I think it's 6 stitches per inch. So around 4 millimeters is the longest stitch. And then you have just unlimited adjustability going all the way down to 0. So 20, 30 stitches per inch it'll do. The really what makes this machine so unique is, I'll just show you, is the fact that this is actually a medium duty. I say medium duty, but you'd be surprised at what it's capable of, but it's considered a medium duty walking foot machine. And you can see the 2 feet here. So you have an outer foot, which is your walking foot. It tracks along with the feed dogs from the bottom, and then you have your presser foot, which is the center foot that's stationary. All that middle foot does is just press down on the fabric while the needle's penetrating the material. And then that foot lifts, and then this foot moves along with the feed dogs on the bottom to feed your materials through really easily. And if you look on the side of the machine, you see all these linkage bars and this whole mechanism. You would not see this on a standard bottom drop feed, lock stitch machine. So this whole assembly here is what really makes this machine so unique and what gives it the walking foot capability. But what I really love about it is, yes, it's a walking foot and it's great for medium duty tasks. I wouldn't say heavy duty. I mean, I wouldn't do 3 layers of vegetable tan leather on this, but it'll easily sew 2 layers of 9-ounce veg tan leather, no problem. I wouldn't run it all day doing that, but it'll easily do it, and I'll show you in a second. But what's so phenomenal about this machine is that because it's not a compound feed walking foot machine, it's just a standard vibrating foot on here, you can actually change out the feed dogs, the needle plate, and the feet to accommodate a variety of different options. So one of those options being a standard foot that you would see on like any other standard lock stitch machine. And you can also change it out to say something like a roller foot if you're working with leather or doing really intricate detail work. If you're making boot uppers, sewing through leather, soft leather bags, whatever, the rolling foot is an awesome option. And I'll show you how to change it out in a second after I show you how it sews. It's pretty straightforward. It's just a handful of screws, not even, and you can switch the machine. So the versatility is what makes this machine so awesome in my mind, and that's why I don't really want to let it go, even though it doesn't fit my table that I made. But we'll see. So let me zoom in here closer, so hopefully you can see the action of the foot here, of the vibrating walking foot. So, oh, and the motor on it, the motor is a clutch motor. Zoom back out. It's a clutch motor, and don't listen to people who tell you that, oh, you have to have a servo if you want to get really control on the sewing machine. Like, the clutch motor can so slow just as easily as a servo can. It really comes down to your setup. And by that I mean the type of clutch motor. So there are two varieties. This one is a 1725 RPM, 1725 rotations per minute, and then there's a faster version which is 3450 rotations per minute. So obviously two different speeds, and you choose a speed based on the machine that you're going to be putting it on. But also another factor that people don't really talk about are the pulley sizes. The smaller the pulley on the clutch motor, the slower the machine will run, but the more torque it will have. And the larger the pulley on the machine, the slower it'll run and the more torque it'll have. So on this particular machine, I set it up with the smallest pulley size you can get on a clutch motor, and that is 50 millimeters. So the speed is really manageable. You have a 1725 RPM motor with a 50 millimeter pulley on it. You'll see what kind of control that you can get. So let me drop the thread down here. Now right now the machine, I retimed the machine to use a 135 by 17 needle. And the reason I did that was because I have other machines that use that same needle size, and I have a bunch. It's annoying. Grab this here. I have a bunch of these needles in a variety of sizes, so for me it was just like, oh, okay, I'll just retime it. Now you wouldn't want to do that with all machines. Like that FAF, you would not want to retime it because it uses really long 190 needles. But the standard size needle for these Singer 31s and the 44s is the DBX1, which from the end to the eye is like 33.9 millimeters. And the DBX17 is a little bit longer needle. It'll still work in this machine, but it can always be timed back to the original needle size. It's really easy to do once you understand like the basic mechanics of how the machine operates. But I have a variety of sizes. I only have one size of the stock size needles, so that's why I timed it with the longer needle. But let's spin the motor up so you can hear it go. So this is a 3rd horsepower, which is more than adequate for any project you would throw at this machine. I mean, people get hung up on the horsepower and the watts on the servos and all this. The reality is a 3rd horsepower on a machine this size is more than capable. To put a 3/4 horsepower motor on this would just be absolute overkill. No need for it. And you can hear how quiet the actual motor is. You hear some of these clutch motors, either they're improperly adjusted, some of them sound terrible. This is a quick spin up and a really nice low purr. It's almost like nothing. It's like white noise, really. So this is like a cotton, might even be like a cotton polyester blend. It's like a pretty tight weave. It does, the fabric does have some stretch to it on the bias a little bit. I don't know. Let's just do, it's folded to four layers. Let's just do 8. Actually, let's do 4 so you can do a longer run so you can see. But, so drop the presser foot, capture the tails, and just start sewing. So you can see the speed management that you can really get with this machine and a properly set up clutch motor. Like that's not even full power, like full speed. This is full speed. And you can stop pretty much on a dime because this is a clutch motor, so it has a brake. So you just put your heel down and it'll slow the machine. But you can also go slower too. And you'll get used to using it. Like, it takes me a little bit of time to transition back and forth between my servo and the clutch motor because the feel is different. So like, I just have like motor memory. But you can see this thing just, you can do slow speed stuff. You can feather the clutch, or you can just go back. But for me, this is like a pretty good speed. Like I have control of the material. I can match up seams. So yeah. So there it is. That's with the walking foot. And you can see how awesome the stitches are too on here. I mean, this is super consistent feeding. And this is I think a Tex 90 thread with an 18 needle. It's a polyester thread, so there's no stretch to it, unlike a nylon thread or something. But you can see this awesome stitches. I probably could have bumped the tension up just a little bit higher on the top, pull these threads up a little bit, but it's not crazy thick material, so you're not going to have because of the size of the thread, you're going to have a little bit of visible knots when you're using really thick thread and really thin material. So I'll stack it up to so we did 4, that's 8, this is 16 layers, and you can see the difference when the oh, I didn't trap the tails, and that's what'll happen if you don't hold the ends. Too preoccupied with trying to make sure I'm staying in frame. So yeah, so if you don't trap the tails, you'll get a little mess at the bottom there. That's kind of an amateur mistake I just made there, but so yeah, you want to hold the tails. You don't have to, or bury the needle, you know, at least when you go to start. So you can see the slow speed control you have. And even with the needle resting right on the fabric, it punches through no problem. And you'll see that when you go through that many layers, the knot isn't really visible. And you bump up the tension actually to pull it further towards the center because you want it to be balanced top and bottom, where that knot is actually right in the middle of the fabric. But you can see the stitch length doesn't change between doing 16 layers and doing 4 layers. And that's because of the walking foot. And basically what's happening there and how that mechanism works is that on a standard bottom feed machine, you have the feed dogs come up, they push up from the underside, and they pull the fabric back. On this machine, what really makes it unique in this walking foot feature here is that you have the feed dogs pushing up from the bottom, you have the walking foot pushing down from the top, and they're both exerting pressure and basically clamping the fabric and then pulling it backward. Whereas a standard foot is just, you're hoping that it just glides across, and you're hoping that the friction between the 2 layers of fabric is actually greater than the friction between the top layer and this foot. Because what happens is if you get really sticky material, the friction between the material and the foot may be too great, so you have a shifting of material, and that's why if you do a really long run of run of fabric and you're sewing 2 layers together, that you'll end up with the top piece being actually longer, or you have excess fabric hanging off the top than the bottom. That's because you have this presser foot pushing on the top of the fabric and it's stretching it as you sew. So that's really one of the really big benefits of having an alternating walking foot machine, is that you have this really consistent feeding of material. The other thing about it is that you can go through thick material a lot easier, or spongy material, say like you want to sew foam onto canvas, or you're upholstering something and you want to sew foam directly on and maybe do some like some ornamental work on it or something. This will feed and it walks over the foam a lot easier and more consistently than a standard foot. Now what's so awesome about this is that you can switch it, and the switch to go over it is really easy. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. But I actually think I ran out of bobbin thread. I did. So I ran out of bobbin thread right as I finished that last stitch. So I'll wind the bobbin and you can actually see how that's done. It's pretty easy. But and then we'll convert it over to a standard foot, and then we'll show you how to switch it over to a rolling foot. So I'm going to turn the motor off for a second. So video is going to be a little bit long, I just realized. But that's okay. So, to wind the bobbin, pretty easy. Pull it off the spool stand. You take it over to the bobbin winder, which is here. And basically, you just run it through this little guide. You run it behind the tension discs, through a hole in your bobbin. It's got a bunch of them, so you run it through the hole here. And you put it onto the spindle here. Okay, you push this button forward, and it will go and press up against the belt. Turn the machine on. Do this without hitting the camera, and you just step on the pedal with the foot raised on the machine, and you just wind. And that'll break off. If you hold it at a slight angle, it'll eventually just break off. But you see, this winds evenly back and forth. I won't wind the whole thing, but you can see how that's done. And you can wind bobbins at the same time you're sewing too. So if you have, this is a dual spool stand, so if you have two of the same threads, you can wind it. And then to basically to put the bobbin in, you want it to rotate over the top, the thread, drop it into the bobbin case, so it rotates clockwise, pull it through that thread guide, and you want it to drop right through there. That's focusing. And when you go to put it back in, you want to hold this lever, because this lever not only does allow you to put it on the pin, but it also holds the bobbin in place. So I've seen people try to put it on where they just try to shove it in and let it click. No, hold the lever, because it'll keep the bobbin from falling out. So it's not something that you have to worry about. Oh yeah, you know, I just realized I have some leather here too. So I'll show you how it sews leather with the walking foot. And then to thread the machine, you just go through this top thread guide, and through this, there's 3 holes. You can either weave in and out, or you can wrap around them. It depends. Like, I just usually wrap around, just out of force of habit. And the more winds, you're going to create a little bit more upper tension. But because I do that, I stick to it because I have the tension. So you go all the way around the tension discs, through this check spring, and you go back under this bar here. Bring your take-up lever to the highest position, which it is in. There's a thread guide here on the side, and you come in through the front. There's a, which is great if you want a little bit more visibility, if you're just using like whatever. This, you can switch it over. It depends on really your personal preference, but like this is fine for a lot of work for me. If I'm doing the heavier duty stuff, I will go over to the walking foot. But for the majority of stuff, you can get away with this. Really depends on your applications. Oh, leather. I'll sew this real quick so you can see what it does. This is, I already sewed it. This is 2 layers of 8 to 9 ounce vegetable tanned leather. Okay, so it'll fit under the presser foot, no problem, and it will sew through this, no problem. It's not even gonna be an issue. Hold the tails, and you can see this thing will feed it, and it will sew it up 0 stitch length. Okay, so that's at the longest stitch length. And you can see that. That is all. So that's that little knot that I created by stitching 0 stitch length in the beginning. And you can't see it. The bottom looks awesome. Top looks great. This isn't even a leather needle. This is a standard universal size 18 needle. It looks really good. I don't know if you can see this, the stitches. And that's, I think, 6 stitches per inch. So it'll sew that all day, no problem. If you want to go heavier than that, you're probably looking at getting a different machine. But you know, It'll sew belts and whatever. If you want to sew, like, let's say you're gonna make like a waxed canvas bag with leather trim on it. This will sew through the leather trim onto your canvas. No problem at all, and it will feed a lot better than using a foot like this. So let's switch it over. I'll show you. It's really easy. So the foot, basically all you do to do that is you remove this side plate cover. Just a single screw here. Set that aside. And then, so this is the whole assembly for the vibrating foot. Now, to remove it, simple. Just follow the bar to the top and there's a screw here. Remove the screw. And the foot, the whole bar and the foot come off with it. And then you have the screw here. Now, if you're going to be switching back and forth between a standard foot and maybe the rolling and the wheel, the roller foot, then I would leave it as is. If you don't plan on using the walking foot ever, then you can remove the whole assembly. You're not going to lose any kind of function, or you're not going to lose anything by keeping it on. But for me, I'm like, well, why have all the moving parts on the machine if I don't necessarily have to? So if you never planned on using the walking foot ever, then you would remove these 3 screws. Screw here, here, and here. This part will come off separately. And then to pull this little like J bracket, or it's like a reverse L, it's easiest to remove this, so you swing this up, and it's easier if you remove the tension adjustment knob and you pull the spring out, and it'll slide right out. Otherwise you're going to be kind of struggling, and it's going to be pressing on the spring. It'll come out, but it'll be more work than it's worth. It's easier just to take those assembly, and then you remove that whole assembly. So you're reducing the number of friction points and the number of moving parts if you don't plan on using it. For me, I would leave it. I don't see any reason to take it off, but you can if you want. So then the next step would be to remove the needle and the needle bar. And the other thing I didn't mention about this foot is this is actually a welting foot, and it says the size on the side. It's a 1/4 inch for 1/4 inch cord or welt. So you can do piping on furniture, add accents, whatever. So now here's the next step that you have to do to be able to convert this. So the orientation of the middle foot here is facing forward. It needs to be facing the side, and it's really a simple adjustment, really easy way to do that. To do this, this is all you do. Remove the foot. You don't even have to unscrew it all the way. Just loosen it, and this foot will come out. And you'll see there's a height difference there between a standard foot and this alternating presser foot. You could see how much you could see, oh, I don't know, I wasn't in frame. So you could see this screw's higher. So what you're going to have to do is you just lower this bar a little bit. So the way to do it, and this is the easiest way, is you're basically going to rock the wheel until your feed dogs drop below the surface of the needle plate here. You want it to be below the surface because you don't want the feed dogs up, because that's going to affect your bottom point for your foot. So put the foot on, and yeah, I realize it's in the incorrect orientation here. That's fine, because you're going to turn it in a second, but you'll see when it's going to pop down. So put the foot on. It's going to be facing 90 degrees. When you look on the side of the machine, you'll see the needle bar comes up, passes through this guide here, and here is the needle bar adjustment, or the presser foot adjustment screw. This will adjust the height, or the height of this foot. So right now the foot's raised, but if I go to lower the foot, you'll see that there's all this clearance. We don't want that clearance there. We want it on the bed of the machine. So what you're going to do is lower the foot. So now the foot's lowered. You're going to loosen this screw, and I'll show you right now. Should refocus. There we go. it's going to shoot down here because there's spring tension. So I'm going to hold the bottom and loosen it. It's a little... So actually the spring tension isn't too bad to shoot it. So the spring tension's on here. So it's not going to shoot down. All you're going to do, on the FAF it shoots down. On this one it doesn't. So it doesn't. You can just loosen it and now you can move it around. It's actually, the spring pressure is stopped right here. So you're going to lower the foot. You're going to grab it, lower it till it's flush with the needle plate. And then you're just going to kind of eye it and see where it lines up, because you want the needle to go. Basically, you want everything to be on track. So you want the feed dogs to be parallel with the foot, and you want to make sure that you have clearance, that the needle hole is in the middle of the foot. Really, just an easy guide here is just look at the side of the needle plate and just make sure it's parallel. Okay, push the foot all the way down. And make sure the feed dogs are below the surface. Because if the feed dogs are pushing up, then you're going to have a gap between. And tighten the needle bar back, or tighten the presser foot screw back down. So now you see, you have the lift, but it's also on the thing. And you can adjust the presser foot tension here on the top by screwing that. So now, grab your needle, reinstall your needle with the scarf facing the right, because you thread it from left to right. Okay, and I'm not going to put the side plate on so you can see what's kind of happening here. Rethread it, drop it through. Now you notice on this particular setup I'm using a zigzag foot, and you can tell it's a zigzag foot because the opening is wide. Now this is straight stitch only machine, so I could use a straight stitch foot, but I actually prefer using the zigzag foot because it gives me more visibility. I can see, if let's say I'm doing parallel stitches 1/8 of an inch apart, I can see where the stitch is right next to it. So it just gives me more visibility for more precise sewing, which I like. That's the foot that I use. But let me grab some fabric and I'll spin the machine up, and you can see how it sews with the standard foot on that same material. Okay, so here's that same material again. I just cut a fresh piece. This is 4 layers. Just drop it in the machine. Grab the tails. And you can see it sews like a standard machine. No problem. Top and bottom look good. And it feeds perfectly straight. I mean, I'm not touching it. Oh, let me aim it down there. Sorry. So, you can see how straight it feeds. I'm not touching it, and it feeds no problem. This assembly is moving, but it's not connected to anything, so it's not impacting how the machine sews. And you'll also notice it's quieter too, and that's because you don't have the vibrating foot clicking up against this part. So as it pushes forward, it just taps this. So you have a slight tapping sound. So it's quiet. So now the machine is now set up to accept high shank feet. So you can get zipper feet, you can get all kinds of different feet that you can buy really cheap, and all over the internet. So that's that foot. Now, if you want to switch the machine over to a roller foot, which I like, and you may too, depending on your applications. It's 4 screws basically. not including the presser foot, but you unscrew the needle plate, set those screws aside, pop the needle plate off, you change out the feed dogs. Now you don't have to change all these parts, like you can just put the wheel on, but there's no, like there's a specific needle plate for it, so you should use it. So you remove the feed dogs, which are 2 screws here. Take the feed dogs out, and you can get replacement feed dogs and needle plates if you want really heavy duty feed dogs to use with the standard foot. They make them, they're $10 for the pair, and they'll have almost double the number of teeth, so double the surface area of teeth that grab on the underside, and it will feed like more ideal for like jeans or corduroy or difficult to feed material. Really, you don't need it because you have the walking foot, but the capability is there. So next you grab the feed dog for the roller foot. Now what I'll do is I'll just usually drop these down in first, position them over, get them in with my finger, and I don't tighten these down all the way on the first pass when installing the feed dogs, because the actual great thing about this machine is that the adjustment for the feed dogs is to the left of the needle plate. Now you have some wiggle room here, so some of the for the feed dogs, so the tolerances are different. You know, if you get different manufacturer or whatever. I'll pass the thread up through there, drop the needle plate into place, tighten those two, and start screwing those in. Tighten them down. Now because I left the feed dogs a little bit loose, I can check to make sure that the feed dogs aren't rubbing on the sides of this needle plate. So you can basically just, I can see it's a little bit close on the right, so I'll center it in the cutout, hold it with my finger, and then that way you know it's not going to rub. And it's everything's parallel centered, and then tighten the feed dogs up. Move this, grab the roller foot. Now the roller foot pivots up so you can put it on. So this particular roller foot came with a longer needle bar screw. So put the screw in and pivot it out of the way so you can get access to that hook. I mean, to that screw. Is it going in? Yeah. Okay. And they paint the surface of these. So the first few times you put them on, it's going to feel like a little tight. So there's a spring here. You pivot the spring out underneath, and you want it to be oriented parallel with the front of the machine. But the spring will swing out of the way also. And you swing the foot down, raise the foot, obviously raise it up. Oh, and you know what? It's a little close. So I'm going to adjust the needle bar height, or the presser foot height, just a little bit. So just raise that up. Move the spring out of the way here. Now when you adjust this, because the wheel will drop down, it will drop down because it's only the same size as the feed dogs. So what you want to do is, when you're adjusting this, raise the feed dogs to the same height as the top of the needle plate, and that way it doesn't drop below the needle plate, in which case you would have the wheel rolling forward and backward. So drop it down. And then tighten that screw. To be honest, I don't know if this is actually, this is one I had lying around in a parts bin. I'm not sure if this foot is actually a full-size 1-inch industrial foot. It just might be a high shank foot. Yeah, so it's a little bit lower. So that was the discrepancy. But anyway, so everything is tightened down. Now you have a roller foot. Oh, I had the take-up lever up when I did that. There we go. So lower it. There we go. There we go. So now you get the lift. So now with the roller foot, hold the threads. And you can see a maneuverability you have with the roller foot. And if you look, the roller foot is actually rolling around as I'm sewing. And you have so much adjustability here, maneuverability here, it's insane. Like way more than you would have on a standard foot. And you can get really close to the seams on something, like if you're sewing up against something really close, you can do it right there. And that's the roller foot. So if you're doing like boot uppers and things like that, or leather or decorative work, or you're tracing stuff, you're doing embellishments, the roller foot is awesome. And and you can just pivot it out of the way. I didn't even have the spring tension there, I should have. And that's it. So this is Singer 44-9 walking foot lock stitch machine with a vibrating foot. It's awesome. If you have an opportunity to pick one up locally, I suggest it. You saw it's really a versatile machine, and highly recommend it. So there it is, the Singer 44-9. Thanks guys.